The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Network Collective's latest webinar on the topic of buying behaviours for UK WANs. Is it time for SD? My name is John Waterhouse. I'm CEO of the Network Collective. I'll be your host for the next 20 minutes. As I'm sure everyone joining knows, TNC is the UK's largest independent telecom strategy and sourcing consultancy. We support over 250 major UK and multinational companies to get the best commercial, technical, operational and contractual results from the network and telecoms solutions. So joining me today is our CTO, Craig Northveth. Craig, would you like to say hello to our listeners?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Hi, John. So quick overview of myself and my role in TNC. So I'm responsible for developing and maintaining TNC's knowledge, understanding the technical landscape, emerging trends across the telecoms market. Yes, my key objective for today is to share with you some of the insights and experiences that we're currently seeing in relation to this topic, UK WANs and particularly SD-WAN as well.
Fantastic. Glad to have you on board, Craig. So before we get stuck into the meat of the webinar, just a couple of quick housekeeping points. So we're going to be very strict on sticking to the 20-minute timetable. Everyone joining will have access to a recording of the webinar afterwards. And we will try to respond to any questions at the end, but any we don't have time to answer on the webinar, we will answer on email afterwards. Right. Oops, clicking on the wrong thing. Okay, here we go. So, as we said, the purpose of today's webinar is to review the very latest market trends around SD-WAN. Now, I'm sure, as everyone joining knows, SD is about the hottest topic in the networks industry right now. But the question we really want to answer today is all about whether this is just hype or whether real-world organizations are really and genuinely buying, deploying, and running SD-WANs. And in particular, the focus on the UK domestic market. So, yeah, we all know SD is an immature but maturing technology. And we have seen deployments increasing over the last 12 months. But almost always, we're seeing that in our multinational customer base, very rarely for UK WANs. So what we're particularly going to tackle on this webinar is three key questions. What is holding back SD-WAN for domestic UK networks? How can you build a successful business case for SD-WAN for domestic UK networks? And what changes are we expecting to see over the next 12 months that could change the market? So we're going to be talking a lot today about what we call our Buying Behaviours Index, or the BBI. So as you all know, TNC leads more network procurement processes for more organizations than any other consultancy. So we have more insight into what's really going on in the market than anyone else. Add into this, and this is very important, we are entirely vendor independent, so therefore we aren't trying to persuade anyone to buy any particular technology or to go with a particular vendor. All we're trying to do is reflect what's really happening in the market and strip out all the sales and marketing messages from all the vendors. So, and there's two key things to understand with the BBI when we get onto that. As you'll see, technologies on the left-hand side are the least mature, and they move to the right as they become more mature. And the technologies at the bottom are the least adopted, and as they move up, they become more popular. So that's the market penetration we're talking about. Now, there's a really interesting point to make here before we move on to the BBI, which is this. Generally, when TNC is looking at BBIs and talking through BBIs with customers, we're typically saying, you know, organizations are defining their strategies and making their procurement decisions based on the upper right-hand section of the BBI. So that is the most mature, the ratified designs, solutions, highest market penetration, etc., etc. Now, what is really interesting with this BBI, given the pace of change of SD within the market and how quickly it's maturing, we're seeing customers making buying decisions looking at what's in the consider segment as well as what's in the procure segment. So that's something quite unusual. We don't say that a lot. So that's a really interesting point to look out as we move on to the BVI. So that is the background completed. There is the BVI for UK WAN right here, right now. Craig, can you talk us through what's going on here?
Yeah, absolutely, John. Just to kind of second your point there on where and how we use this graphic, I guess. What I wanted to do today really is not kind of talk around in depth around the technologies. You know, I'm sure pretty much everybody on the call will be familiar with the models that we're talking about here, particularly the MPLS models. Maybe not so much the SD-WAN models, so we'll focus on that more, and particularly because they're in the consider box, as we've just said there, the market is changing rapidly. There's lots of interest in SD-WAN, hence when we're doing pre-sale sessions with customers and when we're in the early strategy development process, we're very much looking in this consider box area as these technologies become far more recognised. So I guess to start then, you know, historically traditional models are still being the models that we've seen procured as part of the sourcing process that we've been running throughout this year, late last year and into this year. What we are starting to see, and this is an interesting sign towards where SD-WAN might come into play in the future, is we're starting to see much more use of internet services accompanying MPLS, even within the UK domestic market. So typically, the model has always been central internet breakout from data centers on a private MPLS network. That is still quite a common model. Many of our customers still use that model, but drivers within their business, moving more services to cloud, consuming more SaaS-based services, etc., they're starting to see, well, why we're backhauling everything to a data center, why have we got lots of expensive data center infrastructure, why are we managing security at the edge there rather than in the cloud. So they're really starting to, you know, consider either local internet breakout in a hybrid model or network-based internet from a service provider internet breakout perspective. But a key thing here is that the MPLS is still very much alive in the UK domestic network in market. Sorry, I think it's worth just quickly touching on why that is the case and why we've not seen mass migration to internet and then starting to look at some of the SD-WAN capabilities. The key thing here is, and we see this very much across many projects that we run, is there's not a significant commercial difference between MPLS and good quality internet in the UK domestic market. Therefore, many organisations still opt to go down the MPLS route because they get the guaranteed levels of service, they get the SLAs from a contractual point of view, quality of service for things like voice and video type services, and it's still a private closed loop network effectively, which still suits many organisations.
Can I just answer your question on that, Craig? That's a really, really interesting point. You know, one of the things we hear time and again from customers and organizations we speak to when they're considering SD is they've in some way gained this idea that, hey, this is just something you can run over cheap internet services. Mm-hmm. But what you're saying, and I've heard it said by other people within TNC, is that may be the case in some markets around the world, but in the UK, there isn't really that price difference between internet and MPLS to create that commercial gap.
Not a significant price difference, and when you start factoring in the need to secure that internet on a distributed model, when you move away from that kind of private networking architecture to a public-based architecture, then you obviously need to consider additional security controls. They may be distributed, maybe in the cloud, but that's other indirect cost. So although you may be able to get circuits a little bit cheaper, the associated costs that you need to do to put in there to protect that environment, secure that environment, effectively erode any savings potentially that you could make. But that being said, you know, there is a technical benefit, should we say, of moving to more internet services in that kind of hybrid model. So we we typically use the term of reduce but not remove MPLS. That's the way most organisations seem to be going. And to support that, this is where SD-WAN really kind of comes into play, because you start delivering some of them security services, you start overlaying some more intelligence around dynamic path control and ability to route traffic optimally, either to cloud platforms via a private MPLS platform, or straight out to the public internet. I think one key thing, and why we've kind of started building in a SD-WAN model, if you like, in the strategies that we work on with customers, is because it is progressing, it is maturing. Whether it's a DIY approach where you effectively go and buy a solution off the shelf, the most typical one that we're seeing has been very popular, isn't it? Been Meraki. That's a solution that many organisations that have got a requirement to dynamically spin up sites and tear sites down quite regularly, frequently. That's a model that they've adopted. They're able to use 4G services, they're able to use any kind of internet type service. They're also able to deploy that across their MPLS platforms to deliver a single virtual network. So that's a model that we've definitely seen some growth in, and we've got many customers that have adopted that type of approach. I think what's even more interesting now is what's actually happening in the SD-WAN market, and particularly some of the key acquisitions over the last year. So the two biggest ones, I guess, would be Cisco's acquisition of Viptela, and VMware's acquisition of VeloCloud, and kind of what that means for customers and what that means for the service provider estate as well. So if we kind of maybe pick on the Cisco one for now, Cisco and Viptela, many of our customers and many of the service providers that our customers contract with have got very strong reseller and partner agreements with the likes of Cisco. Now, because Cisco are effectively changing their roadmap to incorporate the Viptela solution, SD-WAN's almost been delivered by default now, and the future roadmap will be that SD-WAN will be delivered by default. Therefore, it's not so much customers going out and asking for SD-WAN; it's a natural evolution of the products and services that they've already got becoming SD-WAN capable, SD-WAN ready. So this is where we see the growth, if you like, particularly around telco SD-WAN, will come over the next few years. It will be delivered by stealth rather than customers actually going out there and asking for it. So hopefully that makes sense.
So you're effectively saying it just becomes, it's just another feature of a network that one's buying, rather than one setting out saying, my objective is an SD-WAN solution. It's just another feature within the solution that you're buying.
It becomes an embedded feature, absolutely. So I mean, we've talked in other webinars, and we certainly talk a lot in pre-sales and as part of the strategy development process. The way kind of telcos are moving in the future to become much more service and application orientated, as opposed to wires and circuits. And this is kind of the approach that they're going down. Everything's going to be software based. Everything's going to be virtualized on the platform. Now, whether that's a Cisco platform, whether it's a off-the-shelf x86 platform in the future, that's debatable, and there's quite a lot going on in that space in terms of universal CPE. But the reality is these services will be delivered as software in the future and will effectively just become SD-WAN before we even know it. It won't be people going out and buying SD-WAN. It'll be that is the only option available in the future.
So rather than being SD-WAN, it's just WAN that happens to have SD.
That's again another phrase that I use. I think it will just become WAN. The way we do WANs will just become completely software orientated, and the management and control tools we use will just move into orchestration. It'll become much more service chained, if you like, in terms of the capabilities that are provided, because everything is software application. So the integration between basic routing functions and security capabilities will start coming together. And we completely move more into that applications and services world rather than buying MPLS circuits or internet circuits. That's kind of the way we're seeing the telcos talk about these things. It's the way we're seeing the vendor roadmaps going. So yeah, back to the point that MPLS is not dying in the UK. It won't die in the UK for many years. It'll still be part of the SD-WAN solution. So, you know, people's concept around, well, SD-WAN doesn't involve MPLS is kind of a little bit wrong. It will still require MPLS. You're still always going to need MPLS for the guaranteed quality service and the guaranteed SLAs. But more and more services will start using internet-based capabilities.
So just sort of rolling the tape forwards there on that. So if you look at the looking at the BVI, which is on the screen, you know, we've seen an uptake, again, not so much in the UK, but in our multinational customers, of that DIY SD-WAN model. Now, they were the early adopters. They were the people who desperately needed the capabilities of SD. They weren't prepared to wait for the telcos to productize it, and therefore, and they leapt straight over to a DIY approach. But if I understand what you're saying correctly, what they were leveraging to make the business case for that happen, partly they had a need, but partly the commercial case was generated by the fact that they could leverage the fact that in some markets, many markets, internet's cheaper than MPLS, and therefore that created a sort of cost opportunity for them. That not being the case in the UK, we've not seen, therefore, much. The DIY route has never really taken off in the UK, or not much. But what we are expecting and starting to see the shoots of is that telco SD-WAN. But you know, kind of going from a sort of a ripple to a wave to a tsunami as it just becomes embedded into the solution set of the telcos.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think it's the entry product for them for telcos in the future to become much bigger and deliver a much bigger and better capability than what they do today. So, you know, really kind of moving away from what they are today as traditional asset providing suppliers to software and application providers. So that's the first step for them to be able to do that, and moving into that full software oriented environment platforms. But yeah, the reason why it is where it is on the BBI at the minute is because they've been very slow to adopt. Significant change in their business models and commercial contracting models. You know, the agility and telco provider are not two words that you use very often. So this is something that, you know, really is really challenging them. Hence, you know, particularly again, you mentioned there on our kind of international customers, hence the move towards DIY in that space, because there's no real telco that's out there that can do it for them yet. Yeah. But that capability is growing. It has to grow. They have to do it to stay relevant. But I do. But
presumably, there's also an element of waiting for the technology to mature for them to launch it. I mean, I take your point on agility, and it's absolutely correct. They would obviously counter argue that, hey, we don't want to launch an immature technology that doesn't deliver, and there probably is some validity to that, right?
Absolutely, and that's why, again, back to the point around the likes of Cisco and VMware, you know, two very big players, lots of good partnership agreements, platinum agreements with the service providers. You'll find that many of the big telcos are backing them products. So they're saying, well, actually, if it's good enough for Cisco and it's on Cisco's roadmap, and we've been with Cisco for many years, then that's what we'll adopt. So I think that's kind of why it's taken them a long time, because a few of them did back their own horse, if you like, and have been unable to launch it because the products either failed or disappeared altogether.
Okay. So just conscious of time. So tying this all back to our three questions from the start. So question one, what is holding SD-WAN back for domestic networks? The obvious answer is that DIY SD-WAN has never had an attraction to UK organizations because there's not the commercial benefit of substituting MPLS for internet to create the commercial case to do that, and therefore, you know, generally SD-WAN's been a cost uplift, and that's put people off.
Yeah.
But looking forward, we're talking about the sort of future business case and the changes that will occur. Presumably, the changes you're forecasting, as SD kind of becomes just built into the feature set, the capabilities of future networks. Presumably, that makes that makes the physical capability to deploy an SD an awful lot easier. But presumably, it makes the business case an awful lot easier. You're not necessarily having to go out and procure this whole new feature set to make SD happen. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So it will be an option. So again, moving into this software defined world, it very much becomes catalog based, subscription based, if you like. So the hardware will become very basic, very common, and be able to support the capability should you need it. But if you want to enable that capability, then it's a license subscription cost. The big players are all moving in that model now, to really kind of turn things on and off as and when required through licensing or subscription.
Very interesting, Craig. I'm conscious our 20 minutes is up. We've had a few questions in. There's one in particular I just want to chuck at you. This is Ian from Birmingham. Is saying you have the internet only model at the bottom of the procure section on the BBI.
Yeah.
So the question is, are people buying internet only networks in the UK? It looks like no. Presumably it's no.
So it's definitely a ratified model. Obviously, there's many internet service providers out there. Internet connectivity is widely available. The typical organisations that will do that are few and far between, but they're organisations that have effectively moved absolutely everything to SaaS and operate solely on the internet.
Okay.
So they've got absolutely no requirement for a private network. So we know one or two that do that, but there's not that many.
Fantastic. Good answer. Thank you very much. I'm conscious we've run out of time, so we will draw it to a close. 22 minutes is not bad, considering we said 20, so we'll take that. So we have had a couple more questions in. We will respond to those on email, so thank you for those. Thank you, Craig, for providing us with your insight. Always interesting.
My pleasure.
And thank you everyone for joining, for sending us your questions. Finally, as you'll see on your screen, if you'd like to discuss, as you will see on your screen now, if you'd like to discuss the potential impact of this or anything to do with SD-WAN or anything else to do with network and telecoms, please do get in touch with us via our website, networkcollective.co.uk. We'd be delighted to arrange one-on-one sessions and talk this all through with you further. Thank you very much.
Thank you.